Could I get all your names, please? So our next storyteller.
I do have to do a little bit of setup, so make it long.
Okay. I first met Bessie back in, it was in Arizona. It was on a cattle ranch.
Bessie being a cow.
There you go. And
Clock right there, good.
yeah, she was a longhorn. No, I've known Bessie since. Actually, I think I met you when you were hitchhiking once.
Really?
Yeah, long time ago. She was a lot younger then, and full of enthusiasm about theater and stuff. Remember that?
No.
No, you
Yeah,
don't.
no memory.
Yeah, it was like back in the 90s. Yeah. Anyway, I was quite impressed by her, and since then we've done lots of interesting things together. Well, one or two things together. I guess we haven't done a lot together. We did a play last.
We were on a horrendous board together.
Yeah. When was that? I don't remember that. I block out the bad things.
Or maybe it was you who talked me into joining that board. It was so horrendous.
Yeah, that was it.
That was it.
And we did a play last year. She was my wife last year, and it was a wonderful play. We really enjoyed doing that. Okay. Without further ado, here she is, live from
Expressions on the board. Lovely to see you all. I'm a little bit nervous. I have a brand new story to tell you, which is a true story. So I will begin. I've been waiting all the day long to see the stars in your eyes. My love, come dance with me now and see how the evening flies. And as you wake, my dear, I'll be standing near to hold you as you arise. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Singing from Your Guts. Happy to see such a good turnout. I've never opened the class up to all ages, so it's great to see you young ones and you not as young ones here. Thank you so much for coming. So that is how I opened a class that I taught this summer. It was a series of 4 classes in a week at an arts camp. And it was the first time I'd opened a singing class up to all ages, and really it was a bit of an experiment. Around 20 people were in the class, including one 5-year-old, 4 6 to 7-year-olds, a couple 11, 12-year-olds who were definitely not to be considered children, and a range of adults from 20, 30-somethings on up to a 78-year-old woman about which this story revolves, about whom this story revolves. It's a story about supporting each other in creative expression. It's about the very real need to grieve when we experience great loss. It's about the capacity of women to care for others, often to their own detriment. It's also about empowerment, understanding, and integration that can come late in life. I began the class, as I always do, by asking each person to share a bit about what drew them to the class and what they might be afraid of. Some of you are familiar with this format. I think it's only fair that I first answer these questions, so I shared that I'm drawn to the work because I love supporting people to let their voices out, just as they are, however they sound. Things I might be afraid of include that I might come poorly prepared, or that I'll arrive tired and could be boring. Most of all, I don't want to miss a moment of vulnerability. I don't want to stomp over some tender piece of a person and as a result hurt their feelings. we ran around the circle, and there were some adults who talked about being afraid that their voice might be too loud, or that they'll sing off key, or that they won't find the courage to even let their voice out. They might have been told when they were young that they had an ugly voice, told to mouth the words in the choir, told to be seen and not heard, the sting of a judging voice echoing through many, many years. But this was not the case with Deirdre, a very self-possessed 5-year-old. What she was afraid of was spiders. Now, of course, every child along the way then, of course, was afraid of spiders. You are not afraid of spiders. One of the younger women in the group, a dancer named Lucy, talked about how she finds so much freedom in movement, but not with her voice. Phyllis, the 78-year-old, talked about how she knew that she had some emotions down in there in her gut that she needed to get out, and was very happy to be with us all, and Lord willing, to sing from her guts. Her big smile lit up the room, and I noticed all the children basking in her glow. Next, I asked everyone to stand up, and I'm going to ask you all now to stand up for a little physical warm-up. Rub your hands together. Give your face a little massage. Oh, yeah. Love your face. Love your eye sockets. And love your jaw. Love that jaw that can relax. It can, you know. You can stretch it down like that. And love your tongue. Say hello to your tongue. La, 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 la. Hello to the tongue. And now a little Tarzan love for the abdomen. To the other side. Whoops. There we go. And while you're standing, I'll let you know that I introduced 4 characters. Then please repeat after me. The first one was Blueberry Bear, and Blueberry Bear said, "Where are my blueberries?
Where are my blueberries?
They were right here.
They were right here.
I turned around.
I turned around.
I turned around again.
I turned around again.
And they were gone.
And they were gone.
Blueberry Bear." Next character is the matron, and she's a little bit angry. So maybe anger's a little bit of trouble for you. Bring that out. Acceptance. Anger's okay. Feelings are okay. She says, now I'm going to just say it, but when we say it together, we are going to say it with force. She says, "Who do you think you are, coming in here like this?" All together.
Who do you think you are, coming in here like this?
One more time with a bit of oomph from down here.
Who do you think you are, coming in here like this?
Fantastic.
Fantastic.
The next character is the diva, and her arms are up like this, and there's air underneath the arms, and she sings a 1-note aria, and the words to this aria are, "I am so beautiful." So nice legato, all on 1 note. The note will be this. Take a nice deep breath. I am so beautiful. Oh, I have to agree with every single one of you. And the last character is
The elf, whose voice isn't very pretty, but it sure is efficient. And he says, "Am I bugging you yet? Am I bugging you yet? How about now? How about now? Yay! Yay! I can see I gotcha. I can see I gotcha."
fantastic, you may all say. In that class, I introduced a round, which I'd like to teach you all now as well. It was written by John Crumb, who's a friend of a friend. His child was in a coma, and he wrote it to sing at the child's bedside. It's the one I sang at the very beginning of the show, and I'll sing it again just one time through, and then I'll break it down and you can join in. So it goes, "I've been waiting all the day long to see the stars in your eyes. My love, come dance with me now," if you know it, sing along, "and see how the evening flies. And as you wake, my dear, I'll be standing near to hold you as you arise. I'm not going to expect you all to completely learn it, but I do want to plant the seed. I've been waiting all the day long. Brilliant. To see the stars in your eyes. My love, come dance with me now and see how the evening flies. And as you wake, my dear, I'll be standing near to hold you as you arise. At the end of the first class, we gathered close together in a circle with shoulders touching to make what I call a cone of sound. A cone of sound is where one person starts to sing a tone, any tone, others join in with that tone, and it goes wherever it wants to go, and when it's time, all the voices return back to a single tone. That's the cone of sound. That's how we ended our first class. The next morning, we did our warm-up, our faces, our sinuses, our jaws, our tongue, our chest, our diaphragm. We expressed ourselves, who's the bear, the matron, the diva, and the elf. And then I introduced something new that allowed for more self-expression and improvisation. We got a rhythm going with our bodies, and then in a format of a call and an echo, we each in turn shared a little bit about our morning. We went around the circle, everyone slowly gaining confidence about singing on their own in front of the group, while Deirdre, the 5-year-old, who was scared of nothing but spiders, sang about how she'd woken up and seen a squirrel eating on the porch. Lucy, the dancer, sang about how she was staying with her mother during the week-long camp, and being back in the family of origin wasn't going so well, but she was very brave and she sang about it all for us, including how very early that morning she'd been awoken by her mother banging gongs. And her mother had served her green tea and she drank it even though she didn't like it. Phyllis sang about how she'd been up early to water her garden. She loves flowers and her garden is full of them. She'd also picked, bagged, and froze a big basket of raspberries. We reviewed the round. I've been waiting all the day long. And we closed the class with a cone of sound, shoulder to shoulder, eyes closed, letting our voices again travel to uncharted, unwritten territory. Third day, warmed up our bodies, explored the bear, the matron, the diva, and the elf. Deirdre's squirrels had returned. Lucy's family troubles had intensified. Through tears, she sang about more green tea and gongs waking her up. Phyllis was happy that it had rained during the night and she didn't have to water that morning. I introduced a new form to the group, one in which we build a groove out of vocal sounds. It could involve words or not, but it would start with one repeating part and then we'd make up and add new parts one at a time. I encouraged everyone to involve their whole bodies, to feel the rhythm, and let it guide the creation of the sound. As the groove built, I noticed Phyllis making a cradling gesture, like she was holding a child. And then this gesture moved into a release of her arms out and forward, as though sending something up and out. All the while, a melancholy smile filling her face. She repeated the cradling, releasing gesture a number of times, and others joined in, everyone enjoying the feeling of release as the arms swung up and out. It was a very specific, very powerful gesture. I would find out later why it was so significant for Phyllis. We sang, I've been waiting all the day long, and ended with the cone of sound. Early in the morning, before the fourth and last class, I had the impulse to prepare another song for the group. We had plenty to do, reviewing all that we'd covered in the previous days, but I had a hunch it would just come in handy. I chose one and I made copies. We gathered in the morning, everyone feeling really grateful for the incredible warmth and connection and acceptance generated in the group throughout the previous days, and also feeling sad that it was coming to a close. We warmed up our bodies, we explored the bear, the matron, the diva, and the elf, and we sang about our mornings. Deirdre had disappeared. She was down the hall watching her dad lead a samba band rehearsal. So we didn't hear what her morning was like. Lucy was no longer staying at her mother's house and was feeling fantastic. She had packed up her family and moved to a nearby campground. She'd had a wonderful sleep, and there were no gongs in the morning, and she'd had coffee instead of tea. Phyllis sang that she'd been out picking raspberries, and that if anyone wanted to try them, they were welcome to. And she pulled out a container, and she passed it around. And we all sampled the tender, sweet morsels, while she kept singing that if any of us really liked the berries, well, we could take some home. And from a rolling cooler cart, she pulled baggies of frozen berries, enough for every person in the class. I kid you not. The little girls swarmed at her feet, paws lifted like little puppies begging for a treat. She sang about how grateful she was to have been here to sing from her guts, as we all filled our guts with her most generous offering. During the break, Phyllis came up to me and asked me a surprising question. Why did you bring that particular song, that round, to this class? Well, I answered that I thought the song was very beautiful, that people generally seem to connect with it. And being around, it's a quick way to get a group doing satisfying harmonies. I also said that I found the story of its creation very touching. I asked why she wanted to know. She replied that she really related to the song, that it could almost be about her. When she hears it, her mind is filled with painful memories, and being around, singing it over and over again, it meant the images played over and over again. My heart sank. I took a deep breath. It was hard to hear that my choice of material had triggered such a response, and not just once, but every day for 3 days, and that I hadn't sensed it. That was the hardest part to accept. I said, Phyllis, we don't need to sing that song anymore. I'm so sorry you were having that experience, and I so appreciate you telling me about that. Thank you. Well, in the few moments remaining in the break, I reflected on how to proceed. And I remembered the new song I'd chosen just that morning. A song that, in fact, could not be more appropriate. It's a song about trusting and allowing all that is, a song everybody knows, and which has a subtle Christian reference, which I thought Phyllis might take some comfort in. It was Let It Be by the Beatles. As we sang Let It Be and I looked around the room, some people had their eyes closed, not even meaning the lyric sheet. Perhaps like me, they grew up on the Beatles. Others were singing to one another, and I noticed that Phyllis was smiling, beaming, but not singing. She stared into the distance, and a look of wonder wide across her face. It took me a moment to realize that she wasn't singing because she didn't know the song. Not everybody knows the song. She's only 3 years older than my hippie anarchist artist mother, whose Beatles records we played until the grooves were practically gone, but Phyllis came from a very different background. The community here in the Kootenays is a polarized one. When I first arrived as a 5-year-old in 1971, the child of fairly well-educated back-to-the-lander parents, we were like aliens with our hippie ideas and trippy music. But in recent years, I think the communities have come closer together. Phyllis was someone who, on the outside, one might think is so far on the opposite end of the spectrum from me. But here in this room, we straddled the divide easily, inviting one another to pass over, reaching out a hand, helping each other cross from where and what we already know to that which we don't. Someone asked if we could sing "I've Been Waiting." Time for another deep breath. I shared that for Phyllis this was a difficult song. She related to it quite personally, and I didn't want to cause her any more upset. Well, Phyllis being Phyllis, knowing others would take pleasure from the song, spoke up saying, "No, I'd actually like you all to sing it. You go ahead." I said, "Are you sure? I mean, really, Phyllis, we don't have to." She said, "Yes, I'm sure. I would like you to sing it." So we did. Very quietly, very tenderly, very gently, we sang that song for Phyllis. In the silence after the last note after the last note faded, Phyllis asked, her voice quavering, How could Mary have loved those people? Those people who nailed her son to the cross. How could she find it in her heart to love those people and not hate them? How did she do it? We all shook our heads, all of us also wondering. At this point, our class time was over and we needed to say goodbye, so we went around the circle expressing our gratitude, appreciation, and love, and we gathered for one last cone of sound, arm in arm, our voices becoming one. People packed up their things to leave, and I overheard conversation amongst the locals about gathering to sing on a regular basis, which gave me a lot of satisfaction. I made a point of thanking Phyllis for her honesty and for continuing to come back to this class despite the painful memories being brought up. She reassured me that singing from her guts had been a very positive experience. She was happy to feel so much emotion. She'd spent a long time doing the opposite, having been raised in a house where few emotions were expressed. Her father had survived battle in World War I, and like many, never spoke about his experiences. She internalized that stoicism and carried it into her marriage. She was the caretaker of everyone, her children, her husband, her church community, her garden, her spoon collection. She carried that stoicism into the horrific day her husband came home with the police to tell her, there in her kitchen, that there had been a car accident, that their little boy had been killed, that her husband hadn't seen a stop sign obscured by shrubbery, so he'd driven through and another car had struck the passenger side. That stoicism carried through this worst of all possible moments. She understood it intellectually, and yes, she cried, but she didn't grieve. She kept close rein on those feelings. Instead, she begged God to give her some of her husband's guilt. She knew it was too big for him to bear alone. And God came through. She took on guilt for the death of her child. Why did she do such and such instead of such and such? Why didn't she do such and such? Why? Statistically, the death of a child is something very few couples withstand. But their marriage survived. They stayed together and raised their 2 daughters. She helped in the church, organized after-school activities, tended a large garden, supported her husband. He received counseling for a short period and then was back to work, and gave her daughters everything she'd hoped she'd have given her son. 40 years passed. Her daughters grew up. They left home, had kids of their own, and about 1.5 years ago, her husband passed away. He had cancer. In the end, it was a friend of the elderly who pneumonia that got him. Again, Phyllis's stoicism allowed her to manage the affairs around his death thoroughly and efficiently. Well, now, with both daughters living far away and her husband gone, Phyllis's life became very quiet. She still had her garden, but for the first time, she didn't have to take care of anyone else. For the first time in her life, she could pay attention only to how she felt, to what she might want, to what she might need. This was unfamiliar territory. One morning, she woke with the strangest, very big, very angry feelings. She didn't know what they were about, but they were very big and very powerful. She also didn't realize that it was the 40th anniversary of her son's death. All she knew is that there was something inside of her that she did not understand. She tried to stuff this strangeness back down, but it didn't work. The feelings were very big and very persistent, and they would not go away. She realized she had to get some help. So she went to the hospice, and she wanted to talk to someone there. Those people had been a great support around her husband's death. And the counselor was very kind, and after talking a while, suggested that she might want to read some books on grief. And the hospice library contained a large number of titles that she was welcome to borrow. Well, she left with an armload. And when she got to home, she got to thinking, well, how she might best approach this reading project. And she thought of her timeshare villa over in Fairmont. Maybe that would be a good place to give this her undivided attention. It was also a place that held a lot of family memories, which might make it difficult, but she decided that at least she'd see if it was available. And if it was, she'd go, and if it wasn't, well, it wasn't meant to be. Well, she called. It was free, so the decision was made. She packed up the car and drove over to the beautiful Kootenay River Valley. In her little room, she set up 2 pictures, one of her husband and one of her son, and she lit a candle in between them. Well, according to the books, all the crazy mixed up feelings she'd been having were pretty much normal, and in fact, they were necessary. Well, it was fascinating. And she read and read. And she read and read, and quite some time passed, and at a certain point, she started to feel a little overwhelmed with the intensity of it all, and she thought, well, I need to go back to the land of the living. So she made her way up to the lounge. Now, the lounge was a big, large room with big windows that looked out onto the mountains, the trees, and the grasses and the sky, and there were many couches and chairs clustered in groupings. And she wasn't sorry to see that there wasn't anyone else there. She chose a seat near a window and looked out, doing her best to just drink in the beauty and let the swirl of feelings go. A couple entered the lounge. They looked around the large room, walked directly over to where Phyllis was, and asked if they could sit next to her. Well, Phyllis was in no mood to socialize, and for God's sake, it was a huge room. There were lots of other places to sit. But she didn't feel she could say no, so she motioned for them to sit down, and they did. Well, not only did they want to sit, but they wanted to talk. They wanted to chit-chat. They wanted to talk about their family. They asked about her family. They talked about their son. They asked if she had a son. Well, that was it. She turned to them and she said, I'm sorry, but I'm just not in the mood to chit-chat. I had a son, but he's gone, and I'm here grieving that loss. Well, a curious look passed over the man's face. And he leaned forward, and he put his hand gently on her knee, and he said, "I'm an anger counselor, and my wife here is a massage therapist." And I'm certain that I speak for the both of us in saying that we'd love to work with you to release that anger. That is, if you're interested. Well, the synchronicity of this meeting outweighed whatever fear Phyllis might have felt about accepting this offer. So after a bit more discussion about their experience and credentials, and some discussion about her situation, the three of them walked down to her room. There, they lit the candle by the photos of her husband and her son, and she lay down on the bed. The man asked her questions, and the woman placed her hands on her body. Then, all on its own, with no help from her, Phyllis's body started flipping and flopping around in the bed all by itself, shaking and quaking and quivering and trembling, lashing and thrashing. Well, this went on for about an hour, until slowly her body settled down. The man and the woman started preparing to leave, and Phyllis asked, But what about my anger? Aren't you going to release my anger?" Well, he answered that flipping and flopping of your body there, that was your anger. It was actually, I think, your mother's anger, but I believe it's gone now. I have since visited Phyllis in her home. We toured her garden, and I saw photos of her children, and I feel very honored that she gave me permission to tell this story. And if you're amenable, I'd like to ask you to help me sing for Phyllis. I've been waiting all the day long to see the stars in your eyes. My love, come dance with me now and see how the evening flies. And as you wait, my dear, I'll be standing near to hold you as you And that is very much a true story. And Phyllis is quite a storyteller, so maybe there's a couple